All right, everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Game Changer Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, based in the Jacksonville, Florida market. If anyone's in Jacksonville, feel free to reach out to us. We are still buying real estate in the Jacksonville area, haven't stopped. Each and every week, we dive deep with guests on the show who are changing the game of real estate all over the country. And this is a live show, so if you have any questions, please post them for our guests to answer. And this week, we have my friend John Bianchi on the show. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. Super excited to be here.
Awesome. So if you want to get it kicked off, then maybe just tell everyone how you got started in the short-term rental business.
Sure. I used to be a financial advisor, had about $10 million dollars under management. I was doing pretty well. I was 23, 24 at the time. And I absolutely hated it. And I was just looking for something different, something that was different that would allow me to expand into an actual business and continue to scale. And Airbnb is just something that kind of like came up in news, and it was like the hot topic of the time period. I rented out my extra bedroom at the time and ended up making more rent than I was supposed to. And then I tried to figure out how I could turn this into an actual business. And then I started doing the research and found out that there was tons of people out there that had actually turned it into a business using the arbitrage model and the management model. And so from there, I just took that and opened up my first location in Detroit. And then I opened up another one just outside of Detroit. Then I raised about $250,000, went over to Chicago, opened up another eight or so, then took on a bunch more management contracts at the same time, ended up with about 15. And then COVID came around and wiped that business out. But I was lucky enough to be able to sell all of my contracts to another Airbnb person. So I walked away with something, right? And then from there, I actually took all that knowledge that I had, and the one thing that I did the best, which was Airbnb data, and I started to provide that to people. And actually, you're the biggest component of that. And the reason that I have an Airbnb data company is 100% because of Mike. So I owe you all the credit. We'll definitely get into that and the whole story behind that. But yeah, so from there, that's turned into an Airbnb data consulting company. I've got like 3 courses on YouTube now that talk all about Airbnb data. It's completely free. And I am the head of data for Techvestor, which is a short-term rental investment fund. And Techvestor has raised $37 million dollars in the past uh, 12 months. And we have purchased about 70 properties so far. We can buy about another 5 or so for the rest of the year. And we've got about 35 up and running so far. And and now we're headed into fund two. So we plan on like doubling all of that this following year for 2023. But and I'm being head of data, I've got to analyze all these markets and figure out where's the absolute best place to go, what is the best thing to purchase, how can we maximize the revenue, right? And that all started from me renting out my spare bedroom because I wanted to make a little bit of extra cash and get out of the finance game. So that's my
Yeah.
whole story wrap around.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
For people who don't know the short-term rental business, can you explain the difference between arbitrage management and the other strategy of owning properties?
Yeah, for sure. So arbitrage is when you go to somebody who, a landlord owns a home and you want to rent it out from them, and then you're going to put it onto Airbnb and you're going to make the difference, right? So say I'm going to rent from you, Mike, and the rent is going to be $1,000 a month for a 1 bedroom, and I'm hoping to make $2,000 a month off of Airbnb, right? And hopefully I'll walk away with a little bit of extra cash after all the cleaning expenses and all the additional expenses that come along with that. And then the idea is that you just keep getting more and more and more of those, and they just cash flow just this nice little bit, right? And eventually you pay back your furniture, and eventually you're debt free, and you can just kind of keep riding in on that cash flow. But it's just a cash flow business. There's literally no assets in that business because
Mhm.
furniture is not an asset at all, right? So anyways, that's arbitrage. Management is when somebody has an Airbnb up and running, but they don't want to do the work, and you just take it over for them, right? So pretty straightforward stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. And
Yeah.
so talk about how you got into the data side because I think it's super interesting.
So it actually just started because I go down like rabbit holes. You know what I mean? When you
Mm.
start like looking into something and you just start going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I started the first rabbit hole I went down was like trying to understand Airbnb business model before I ever had my first Airbnb, right? And I came across AirDNA, which is this data provider for Airbnb. It's called airdna.co, right? And it gives you all of the data on every single Airbnb. It tracks every single Airbnb's calendar every single day to figure out exactly how much they're making. And then they provide all of that data in these nice little dashboards for you to be able to analyze and understand it, right? So during my process of getting everything started, I came across AirDNA, realized and started going through all the numbers and realized how much money some people were making. And it kind of blew my mind, right? And
Mhm.
so, I go out and I open up my first two, but then I realized very quickly, I'm like, I'm going to need a lot more money to open up more of these locations, right? And so naturally, wanting to scale a business and wanting to grow it, I had to find some investors who were going to be willing to partner with me to help build out this business. And so to be able to get the investors on board, I just thought to myself, well, if I can prove to them that these homes are going to make X amount of dollars by using the data to prove that I know exists over here on this like AirDNA thing, and I barely understood it at the time, right? But I'm like, I know it exists over here. That's when I really started to like get obsessed with the data, because I was
Mhm.
like, I had used it to prove to investors that they could get a nice return from their money, right? I had used all that data. Then I got their money, and then I had to go find these locations and ensure that they actually made money, right? And so we would vet before we would actually sign a lease, we were vetting all of the data to try and make sense of it. And there's like all these little stories that kind of happened along the way that allowed me to um, figure out like all the nuances with the data and how to like avoid bad data and how to make sure you're getting the good data and how to stretch the most out of that data as you possibly can. I just kept learning it over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And then, but probably like the biggest game changer was I went on to this guy's, he had a course. I bought his course at the time, and I was highlighted on his monthly coaching call, right? And he wanted me to talk a little bit about what I've been doing. And I started talking about the numbers of how much my places were making. And he was like, how did you find these places? And I was like, I just used the data. You know what I mean? Like thinking it was like no big deal. And I explained it. And even him who was teaching the course didn't understand like what I was talking about. Right.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the podcast, let's call it, right? I gave out my email and told people, I'm like, if you're interested, just reach out to me. And the amount of like people who reached out to me and were like, I have no idea how to do this. I didn't know this was a thing. Like, how did you do it? Can you teach me it? Right. It just made me realize that I had kind of cracked like a little bit of a code. You know what I mean? I had understood something within the data that a lot of other people hadn't figured out. And so from there, I realized I could start helping other people with it and teaching it. It kept developing and developing and developing, and eventually, we got to where we are now. But that's a really long story of explaining how I got obsessed with the data and how that all started. But it's been extremely beneficial for myself, and I know the free courses that I have on YouTube, like thousands and thousands of people have gone through them, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure it's helped out a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, so you talk about figuring out good data and bad data, and I know AirDNA has these kind of like, summary type views, and from your and my discussion, that's not the way to look at it. Can you maybe share why and how you instead look at data that's more accurate?
Okay, so you touched on two things there. One is good data versus bad data, and the other one is averages, right?
Hmm.
So first off, I'll just start with average because it's easier. Averages to me are completely useless. If you tell me that in Jacksonville a four-bedroom on average makes $75,000 a year, it means literally nothing to me because a four-bedroom, because an average is just, there's some people doing better and some people doing worse, right? But the idea, what I want to know is, I want to know the people that are doing better, why are they doing better, and where are they within Jacksonville that's allowing them to do better, and what are the attributes of their home that is allowing
Hmm.
them to do more than 75,000, right? And then I'm going to reverse engineer that and go, okay, well, how much does that home actually cost to purchase? And if it's 500,000 and the home can make 100,000, great. You know what I mean? Like that's a great buy all day.
Yeah.
But that's why averages are completely useless. You can't make an actual, like, you can't buy a property with an average. What you can do with an average is you can gauge if one city is making more revenue than another city, but that's about
Hmm.
it, right? Which
Hmm.
can help you just make a decision of what market to go into. But good data and bad data, this is something I talk about all the time, and it's probably like the one message that I try to get out to everybody, because if you get bad data, you can really shoot yourself in the foot. And a really great example of this is I almost signed two $7,000 a month leases for these like really nice luxury properties in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is not a tourist hub, and there's not a lot of money being made there. But when I was first getting started, I was using bad data, And the data told me that these homes are going to make like $150,000 to $160,000 a year, right? And so I'm like $7,000 a month. I'm still going to be cash flowing a ton of money, right? It was like no big deal. But then what I realized was that data was actually inaccurate because
Mm-hmm.
AirDNA and the algorithm, the way that it was tracking it, was thinking that these people are renting out these homes for all year long, but really they were just renting them out for the Michigan football games, right? Which is like 8 weekends out of the year, and they're renting them out for like $1,500 for the Friday night and $1,500 for the Saturday night, but they're only doing it 16 days out of the entire year. But they thought it was the entire year they were doing it because there's some issues with their algorithm. And so, anyways, that's just a quick example of a quick story of bad data that can I tell to scare people to listen to what I'm trying to say, because you got to make sure you understand what good data is and what bad data is before you start using this data to make financial decisions, right? Especially with other people's money.
Mm-hmm.
So let's it's a really easy way to understand it. Now, first thing you need for something to be good data is you need an Airbnb host who has been renting out their home for at least over 250 days consistently with no issues, and they've been running it like a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get somebody who's actively like a full-time Airbnb host, right? That's how you're going to get good data, because they're truly running it how they should be running it, not just on some weekends, right? Because that's what you're going to be doing as well. You're going to be running it out the entire time. And so you want the data that you're going to be using, you want that person to be an active Airbnb host full time, right? So that's kind of criteria number one. And you can easily figure that out by just seeing if they have reviews every single month for the past 12 months. If they do, then they've been renting it out for the past 12 months. It's super simple.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing you need is you need AirDNA to be tracking them during that entire time period. Okay. So uninterrupted. So if you go on to AirDNA, there's this little section that pops up that says days available, right? This little bubble, when you hover over it, it pops up, says days available. That number should really say days tracked, because it's how long AirDNA has been tracking and recording that Airbnb's listing data, right? And so you'll go in there sometimes, you'll see that it says like 30 days available, which should say like 30 days tracked, right? And it's going to give you
Mm-hmm.
like a revenue number if this person's made $5,000 in these 30 days. Well, you look at that and you can think to yourself, well, if I just take that 30 and I times it by 12 months, I can figure out what this person made over the full year, right? However, with AirDNA, the issue with doing that is seasonality, right? There's some months where you can make, in some markets, you can make 30 to 40% of your entire revenue for that season in 1 month, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you could be looking at a month that was either peak season or dead season, and if you times it by 12, you're just going to get it wrong, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why you need AirDNA to ideally be tracking this listing for over 250 days. So one, you need somebody who's an active full-time host, and two, you need AirDNA to be perfectly tracking them for that entire time period. And that's how you get that good data, which you can then use to make uh, annual revenue decisions, right? So it's going to give you that annual revenue number, which is that top line number of how much is this home going to make. And then all of your other expenses are very figure outable, right? You're going
Mm-hmm.
to figure out what the utilities are, what the cleaning fees are, all that stuff. It's just the top line number that's the hardest one to figure out, which is
Yep.
essentially the main thing that I do main thing I help people with is that top line number.
Yep. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I always found it interesting about how you look at it as an annual revenue number. A lot of other people that I've used to speak with in the past would always be taking kind of their, average daily rate, times the number of days in the year, times their occupancy rate, right? And it seems like that after speaking with you about it, that you don't think that that's the right way to do it.
The issue that I have with that is that the average daily rate can vary so much for 4 bedrooms alone, right? You can have like a luxury 4 bedroom that has a 50% occupancy but is renting out for $1,000 a night, and then you have a regular 4 bedroom that's down the street that has a 750,000 or 750 nightly rate, but its occupancy is 75%. Like, and it varies, all these little combinations and whatnot. So to like grab an average and say, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and this is going to be my average occupancy, right? Like, it just, to me, it's not as clean as that, right? It really isn't. And so your occupancy is going to vary depending on how aggressive you get with the price. If you lower that price, you can have 100% occupancy all day long, right? But you're going to lose out on your everything else. And obviously, you wouldn't do that, right? But you can't just enter into a market and be like, oh, I'm going to hit 80% occupancy. It's like, well, Yeah, you could, but you'd have to, you might have to lower your price or whatever it may be, or I'm going to
Right.
get 700. Like the market's going to determine what it's going to be, right? So I always like to think about it where it's like, okay, all of my competition is making roughly $100,000 a year, right? If I just put a home together that as nice as theirs, right, and then I put my I figure out what they're pricing for on a every single night throughout the year, and then I put it up next to theirs, I'm likely going to get rented out and booked out as much as or as often as they are, which is probably going to end up likely having me making the same amount that they're making at the end of the year, right? I think, does that make sense? I'm
Yep.
taking what they're doing and I'm replicating it, and then I'm going to price it roughly in the exact same amount, and we're all going to be in the same category, and then we're all
Mhm.
going to get booked around the same. And to be honest, the strategy sounds so simple and so stupid, but it has worked over and over and over again. Where it's like, hey, this guy's making 100,000, or these 10 people are making 100,000. I'm going to put my home up and do the exact same thing, and I'm likely going to make 100,000, right? And it keeps working over and over again. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my strategy. That's why I like to look at it in an annual revenue state rather than like the average daily rate and the occupancy. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I know it was a little bit confusing and hard to explain, but that's just how I am and how I like it.
Yeah. And then I think you bring up a good point there, like how, if this guy's doing it and you make the same product, that's probably what you'll do. What's your opinion of people who kind of want to set up these very, very unique properties?
Yeah, like kudos to them, man. Honestly, like that's one thing that I want to eventually do, but my entire strategy is the Burger King logic, right? So McDonald's spends millions of dollars to figure out what corner to be on. Burger King opens up across the street, right? They're just replicating what's already working in the exact same location. That's literally my entire strategy. What I've always done is
Mhm.
just replicate what works, right? And so I always tell people, when there's no data, I'm useless, because I can't help you if there's no data, right? Like I'm just checking out what everyone else is doing and trying to give you an answer. But as soon as there's no data, I'm useless. So, those people that are out there that like find a piece of land and then they're like, hey, you would be great here in Airbnb, right? And it's like, and then they put it up and they make it beautiful, and then all of a sudden it's making $200,000 a year because they just built something that was so amazing people wanted to come to. That stuff to me is amazing, right?
Mhm.
But it's at another level. It's definitely something I want to do without a doubt. But you really got to trust your gut. You gotta build a product that people are willing to come to. You've got to go above and beyond, right? I just saw this newest listing, one of the coolest listing. Can't wait to see it. I'm definitely going to stay in there one day. But it's a cave that they put up an Airbnb, this A-frame Airbnb. It's called the Dunlap Airbnb out in Ohio. It's one of my favorite Airbnbs. And on this piece of land, they have a cave, and in the cave, they just built an Airbnb. And it's not just like an okay Airbnb; it's like a luxury Airbnb built into a cave, and it is so beautiful. I guarantee you, it's going to make easily 150 to $250,000 a year, like
Mhm.
without a doubt, right? So power to those people who can actually, have the balls to go and do that. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
I'm allowed to say that on this, but
Yeah,
it
you can
is
say
what it
whatever
is.
you want.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never done anything like that myself. I mean, it's interesting, but it's a lot riskier for sure.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna do it, you either got to do it with your own money, right, and be okay with losing if you do, or do it with somebody who really wants to do it, right? Like, don't talk anybody into doing that because it could go wrong so quickly. And then
Yeah.
the other issue with it is getting your money out, right? So like, that cave home is never going to appraise for what it actually should appraise for, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
it's going to be a bit of an asset. Like they definitely could sell it at one point or another, but they're definitely not going to get a mortgage from the bank at the amount that they actually should be able to get a mortgage from the bank, right?
Mhm.
It'll cash flow nicely and all these different things, but it's just not going to happen. And so when people are building like tree houses and stilt houses, or sorry, like lookout houses and stuff like that, and glamping sites, like that's kind of the issue with a lot of these things, is that you can't appraise them and pull a lot of money out that you originally put in to get it all set up. Whereas like traditional home, you obviously can, right? So
Right.
you lock in a lot of money when you do that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what's your guys' model at Techvestor? Are you guys buying these properties, or is it more of an arbitrage business?
No, we're buying. We're buying.
You're
We
buying.
don't do arbitrage at all. Yeah. So we are in, I think it's 10 markets right now. We're in 10 different markets. We only buy single family homes.
Mm.
We bought, like I said, about 70. We've got 35 of them up and running. We just keep making more money every single month. The strategy, like we're honestly like I wish I could. We're about to be able to start sharing our actual numbers and showing how well we're doing and stuff like that. And I'm ecstatic for it because
Yeah.
we're crushing it. To be honest, like in my opinion, we're doing really well. And the reason I know we are crushing it is because I'm looking at all of the other Airbnb listings and we're outperforming them. So
Mm,
our strategy for the most part is to find a area that has a lot of demand, right? Where we can get a 20% purchase price, sorry, revenue to purchase price. So if the home costs
mhm,
500,000, we want it to make $100,000 a year, right?
mhm,
And so that's essentially what we're looking for everywhere we go. But what we've been doing is exceeding that by not a crazy amount, but enough, right? And every little percentage that you exceed that by is just free cash flow, right?
yeah.
And
Per property.
so
Yeah.
per property, exactly, right? And we're outperforming most of the competition because our strategy is to figure out exactly what everybody is doing, right? What are all amenities that they have? What are they providing? What does the home look like? What is the style? Who is the customer that they're trying to market this to? And then we take all of that and we put together a better product. We put together a better listing with more amenities, more features. We'll combine all of the amenities that everybody has and then put them into one listing so that nobody can compete with us, right? And
Mhm,
then we'll also on top of that design it extremely well. It costs a little bit more upfront to do that, right? But the return is there, right? So like when we look at things, when we're investing dollars, we're looking at let's say a hot tub's going to cost us $7,000, but we know it's going
mhm,
to increase our revenue by $10,000 to $20,000. So we're like, well, that's the easiest investment that we'll ever make, right? You know what I
mhm,
mean? It's like automatic and automatically returning us money, right? So, anyways, what I'm trying to get at is that we buy single family homes. The strategy is to maximize the revenue out of those homes as much as we possibly can. And we do that by trying to figure out every single last little thing about that market and what drives revenue in that market, and then apply all of those strategies to our listing and then market it and price it extremely well in comparison to everybody else. And the best part about it is that it's working, right? So, like,
right.
we have a track record now where we're like it's no longer a strat, like a theory. You know what I mean? We have like a lot of proof behind it, and so once we are able to start talking about actual numbers and whatnot, we can get into that another day. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
And
excited for it.
do you guys manage these properties in-house across 10 different cities or?
Yeah, so we're vertically integrated. We manage everything ourselves, in-house PM. We're buying the properties ourselves. We're renovating them ourselves. We're designing them ourselves. Like we're raising money ourselves. Like we're doing literally everything from end to end. I can't take credit for it. I literally are just the data guy. I'm just picking out the markets. I'm just picking out the homes. Seif and Sabrina are the founders, and they do everything, right? So like they're running the ship. You probably should have them on here one day, honestly, because
Yeah.
they're like they're the real game changers in my opinion. So
And then are you guys able to pull out debt on these properties, or is this just cash from the fund and then you're going to worry about refinancing at some point later?
no, I mean, I think we have I mean, once again, just on the data side, but I'm not. I'm like 99% sure that we have a mortgage on every single one of the listings that we have, which means we've got debt on all of them as well.
Hmm.
And so we're not just buying them all cash, right? But so in other words, we can buy more properties and we do refinance them and everything. And like, there's quite a few in some of these markets that are lower quality homes that we've been, fixing up and
Hmm.
refinancing. And then, we were able to pull more money out and buy more properties, right? So, and then it cash flows really nicely. So it's a good strategy so far.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I think an interesting story is if you want to share with everyone you've told me before is about the extra bathroom in Chicago. I don't want to give it away, but
So, oh, dude. So I told you this story before, but
yeah.
I probably told you that like 3 years ago,
Oh,
right?
it's a long time
And
ago. Yeah.
yeah, probably longer. But um, I have to almost like kick myself because it's been now like 3+ years of me looking more and more and more into the data and more markets and trying to understand things even more thoroughly, right? And that whole additional bathroom strategy or logic that I had before turns out not to be as true as I thought it was, right? That trend
Mm,
that I was seeing. So I'll explain what I thought I was seeing, and then I'll explain how I've sort of debunked my own theory, right? So what I used to see, and my main market was Chicago, so I only studied Chicago. I knew everything. I still know everything about Chicago inside and out. best places to go, worst places to go, stuff like that. But one thing that you could see in the data that was super clear was that if you had an additional bathroom, you were going to make $20,000 more, right? Like the average 2 bedroom, 1 bath made 50,000. The average 2 bedroom, 2 bath made 75,000, right? So in my head, I'm like, get an extra bathroom, you'll be good to go, right? And what I ended up realizing over time was that the homes that had 2 bathrooms were just newer builds, right? They were they were in the the high rises with the floor to ceiling windows, and they were modern and they had views of the city, and that's why they had 2 bathrooms, because it was a 2 bedroom, 2 bath. It was a nice higher end condo, right? And then you get the other ones as a 2 bedroom, 1 bath. They don't have the nice windows that are floor to ceiling. They have the older kitchens. You know, they're 1 bath. So naturally, people are not going to be booking those out as much. And so what I realized was that it's actually more about the quality of the home and the listing and how it's all put together that can
Mm,
determine it. Now, having the extra bath is going to clearly make you more money, but when you're going to rent out a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, it's going to be in a nicer building, so the rent is going to be more money no matter what, right? So it
mm,
just like it goes. Well, logically that makes sense. It's a better product, right? It's a
mm,
nicer listing, and so, but you know, I've looked into a lot of different markets and I haven't seen that trend in a lot of other markets, right? And so
mm,
that was another thing that made me start realizing, like, I think I have this wrong, right? Because I was starting to like see like you'd have these 4 bedroom, 2 baths that were crushing 4 bedroom, 3 baths, right? And I'm like, well, why is that happening, right?
mm,
And I was trying to understand it, and like one little theory that I have on it still is that Chicago is such a competitive and dense market, right? And so, because it's so condensed in that little area with so many Airbnb listings in that one specific area, that if you do have the extra bath, it does become a competitive advantage, and people will want to book you more. Now, yes, your home may be a little bit nicer, but at the same time, people are going to kind of sway to wherever there's more bathrooms in a super condensed area because they have the option, right? And
mm.
because so if they have that option of taking it over the other one, then they're probably going to go for it. Whereas in these sort of, with these not as uh, overly populated with Airbnb locations, right? They just don't have as many options, so it is what it is. They can't
Mhm.
take them all. I hope that made sense. But yeah, that was the strategies or theories.
But I guess it still did work out, right? Because the ones with the extra bathroom were the nicer buildings. It did make you more revenue, and the rent wasn't 25 grand more, 20 grand more a year. Uh,
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a very good point. Yeah. So it definitely definitely would make more sense to still get the 2 bedroom, 2 bath, right? Just like, in a lot of markets, it still makes sense to get the home with the pool, right, over the home
mhm.
without the pool. Like that's a super easy one, right? But there's definitely a lot of little strategies there that make a lot of sense. Yeah.
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 So what else are you guys looking at? I mean, obviously data, but what else are you guys looking at when you go to enter a new market? I mean, you guys have 10 markets that you're in.
So we're actually in the process right now of getting way more in depth and thorough with the way that we go about doing that.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that are changing because we have to enter into a lot of more markets to be able to expand it the way we want to continue to expand. But the main thing, we're looking for the 20% purchase price to 20% of revenue to purchase price. That's definitely a big key indicator for us. We want there to be a good amount of inventory. We want the inventory to be not shitty homes and stuff that won't resell easily. Like, we want it to be a nice product. There needs to be a good amount of rental demand within that area, right? It's Jacksonville is a good example of a place that is has some travel demand, but not a lot. You know what I mean? Not like an extensive amount, but it still has some, right? But the issue with that is that it just doesn't drive a crazy amount of revenue, right? So
Mhm.
like a 4 bedroom home doesn't make $130,000 a year in Jacksonville because there's not that much demand
Mhm.
for people to be vacationing in Jacksonville, right? Like that's kind of the idea. So we still want to be in these markets where people really want to get in there and are willing to pay an arm and a leg to stay in these Airbnbs. The seasonality of the location definitely matters, right? So when it comes to Airbnbs, you have those high seasons, those low seasons. We don't want to be going into too many markets that have like only 2 or 3 peak season or peak months, and then the rest is dead. We're in one of them right now, and that's kind of enough for us. You know what I mean? Like, because you have to
Yeah.
sit so empty for not empty, but just so dead for so long, and you're really banking on those 3 months to work out for you. And if they don't, you kind of lose a whole year, right? So
Mhm.
that's definitely something we keep in mind as well. We're always looking at the year over year revenue changes, right, and
Mm,
also the supply changes. So we're trying to make sure we're trying to ensure that we don't go into a market that's saturated. So we do that by looking at the supply and demand, right? As an example, I think uh, yeah, I think I'm trying to get the numbers exactly right, but it's pretty insane. So for Jacksonville, there's like a 40% increase in the number of Airbnbs over the last year, but only a 20% increase in the revenue year over year, which means that each individual listing roughly made about 20% less than they did the year prior, right? So if in
mhm,
2021 you made 100,000, in 2022 you made 80,000, right? Which is like that sucks, right? Especially if you went in hoping to make 100,000. But that's just because there's so many new listings and there wasn't that much enough demand to keep up with all those listings, right? And that's something that we're seeing in a lot of markets, but some markets are holding true, right? So like some markets they're keeping up
mhm,
with that. Some markets are getting people have been essentially like wanting more Airbnbs there, right? Because there's so many people that are going there, and now they have Airbnbs that are available that they can go and stay at, right? And so the revenue is outpacing the supply. And so, we try to look for those sort of consistent, steady markets that you can find as well. Um, and then there's another one too that I was just thinking of. I mean, you also like, what's that? What's the potential of the? So because we're in so many different markets, we're always curious as to know. Sorry, because we're in so many markets, we can have different game plans in different markets that
mhm,
will all come together nicely. Okay, so what I mean by that is we have one market where the equity doesn't grow very quickly, but it cash flows extremely well. It's without a doubt
mhm,
our best cash flowing market, hands down, but probably our worst equity market, right?
mhm,
And then we have the exact opposite in another market, right? Where we cash flow okay, but the equity that we're getting from that area is significantly better, and so they offset each other, right? And so when we're going to go enter into a new market, we know what our strategy is with all of our different markets, and we want to make sure that we're not just going completely for yield or completely for equity, right? Like we got to get a good balance of that between the entire portfolio if we're going to be entering into a market. And so that's something that we definitely keep an eye on as well, as we're holistically building out this portfolio.
And when you guys are underwriting deals, are you looking at like cash on cash return or IRR, or like what are you guys seeking out in terms of return?
Yeah, so it's mainly cash on cash.
Okay.
That's our main thing. I mean, if you get your cash on cash right, your IRR is going to look great. You know what I mean? Like it's always going to look good, right? So,
Yeah.
it makes more sense for us to keep a good eye on our cash on cash, and like the way that we have set up the fund as well is we give out distributables every quarter, right? So
Hmm.
we're definitely going to be always looking to make sure that we're cash flowing well within the portfolio, and you know that's the main thing that we're kind of keeping an eye on, and we have a certain sort of range that we want the property to make if we're going to get it right. So like it has to fall within a certain uh, projected cash on cash yield, right? Or like a projected yield in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if it falls within that range and it meets all of our other criteria and it's within the market, then that's a home that we'll end up purchasing.
Yeah.
But it's got to fall within that range because then we know that we'll be able to get that. We'll be able to get the returns to the investors that we want to be able to get to them.
Is there a certain cash on cash return that you guys like to shoot for as a floor, or?
So I'm not sure if I can share that. I was
Okay,
just
fair
thinking,
enough.
I was gonna say it, and then I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, is that one of the numbers I'm not allowed to say,
I
or
don't
like
know.
how? Yeah, because like I said, I'm just the data guy.
Okay.
just, I know what the numbers are, right? And I know I have like what we tell our investors of what they're going to be getting and whatnot. And I know that when we go to purchase property, as long as it's within this certain range, we'll purchase it. And by doing that, we are hitting the numbers that we have told the investors that we're going to hit, right? So I know like everything is adding up and it all is making sense. I'm just not sure if I can actually state exactly what those numbers are, or what that sort of range is. But it's a
Fair
little bit
enough.
different for us because we're a fund and most people are just themselves, right? It's their own money, so it's a different ball game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, what else has changed over the years in the way that you kind of look at data?
So one thing I used to be like crazy about was location. right? Like it was like if you're on the other side of that street, you're wrong. You know what I mean? Like if you open up a listing right over here, like you're not going to make any money. And in some cases, that still can be true.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I've come to realize is if you build it, they will come for the most part. Okay. And what I mean is, if you put together a listing with the all of the amenities and the features and the design and the you market it well, you take good photos, you price it properly. Like if you do all of these things right and a better than everybody else, and you're not in a terrible area, you're still going to get booked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like as an example of this case, so in Chicago, I used to tell people like, don't be outside of Lincoln Park. Like Lincoln Park is it; it's the place to be. It's where you're going to make all the money. Blah 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 blah. Then what would happen though is I'd go through the data, and there would be this a couple of homes that were in like two neighborhoods over, which I would consider like I would never go into because I'm like that's too far away from the city. But there are
Mm-hmm.
these like beautiful, beautiful listings, like really well put together, way better than mine at the time, right? Just like done perfectly, and they're making more than mine, right? And so the thing is like sometimes location doesn't matter if you can put together a great property, right? And you put together a great property through design and amenities and photos, right? So that's I would definitely say that's one of the biggest like game changers that I've had or that I've realized over the years, which may not sound like that big of a deal, but I used to be extremely strict on like you can't go outside of this area, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I taught most of my videos I teach about it. That's one thing that I talk about a lot.
Yeah.
And then another thing on top of that is when you're going into a market, each market is going to have their own top performing properties, right? And each of those top performing properties are going to have a certain set of amenities that play really well to the clientele that's going to be coming to that area. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one thing that I've started to do a lot more is try to understand why, regardless of the location, regardless of the bedroom count, whatever it may be, why are these properties making the most in this area out of everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then understand what those guys are doing well, and then try and take that information and apply it to whatever property you're going to be looking at. But then then let's say you're on the other side of the city, right? And you know what the top performing properties are doing, but now you're on the other side of the city. Just make sure you're gathering the data from around you as well as applying what works really well, right? You're kind of combining those two, so you kind of have like a leg up on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I'll say is that only using the data from your local market is also an issue because let's say you're in Jacksonville, let's say, right? Jacksonville is not the number one Airbnb destination in America, right? And so
You don't
because of
say.
that, yeah, because of that, it doesn't have the greatest Airbnb host out there, right? Like think of that. Think if you're like an amazing Airbnb host and you can make a ton of money. You're not going to Jacksonville, right? You're going to a market where you can enter into a market with 10,000 people and go, I can beat all you guys. I can do it better. I can do it better. I can do it better, right? And so what I'm trying to say is look into the best markets that are out there, right? Look into your Scottsdales, your Nashvilles. You can even look into Kissimmee. Look into any market you can think of, Miami, New York, Chicago, all these places that are like the top of the top, the best of the best, right? Where the best people are coming to those markets, even Austin, right? And understand what they're doing well, right?
Mm-hmm.
What have they done? Sorry, look at the top performing properties in those areas and take a look at their listings and see what they're doing well, see what they're doing right, see what they're doing different. And if you take that and apply it to your market, that where everybody else is like below average, and you just took the strategies from like the top people in the best markets, you're gonna destroy that market that you enter into. And we literally just did this for well, I guess not just the market. The property's been up for probably about 4 months now, but we went into a market where nobody really knew what they were doing, and we took strategies from this other market that we had, and we applied it to that market, and it works so well. It's insane. Like we were planning on making like $150,000 from this one property. We're on track to do 200,000, right?
Whoa.
And it
Okay.
yeah, like it's a huge difference in the amount of money that you can make when you just take these strategies that work really well because people want it. You know what I mean? Like people literally want it. If they're going to the most competitive market where there's 10,000 listings and they're choosing this one listing over everybody else and they're willing to pay an arm and a leg to stay there, if you give that exact same experience in a different location, they're going to pay an arm and a leg to stay there as well because it's like the best of the best and they really, really want it, right? You're now
Yeah.
competing on value and not actual nightly rate. It's like we can offer you so much more, and people don't understand what the dollar value is for having like 10 more amenities than the next best listing. So you can jack up your prices because they just don't understand. They can't like put a dollar to it, but they just know they want it. And they're like,
Mhm.
I'm willing to pay that amount to stay there for this time period. Right. So those are three things that I can think of off the top of my head that we do really well and that we've done differently.
What's an example of something that you think does apply across like multiple markets? I mean, I know like the basics, obviously, like, good photos and all that, but what is there something that you see like consistently across top performers across the country or maybe even across the world?
It's a good question. That's a really good question. I don't want to just say hot tubs because that's such an easy one.
Everyone
Hot
loves
tubs.
that.
Have a pool. Top performers always have those. It's true. Like the people do. I would say it's like design goes a long way, a lot further than what people think. Like
Mm,
really good design, like having a theme that is very clear and obvious through the entire home and flows out into the backyard. So like say you go with like a boho theme or a desert theme or whatever theme you choose.
mm,
Themes actually make a big difference in how well a property will do in comparison to another one. Um, Another thing is like this. So this may sound obvious, but the size of the property does matter more than you would think, right? So like having you know an extra large game room in comparison to your competitor who has like a small game room, or having like a game room in a movie theater, those things move the needle for people, right? Those things get people to book. So having those is such a competitive advantage, and I have seen that a lot across a lot of different markets. Kind of to come back to design, when it comes to design, you want to make sure that you're designing to the exact customer archetype that fits best for the market that you're in.
mm,
So to put it like to a super obvious example of this, right, is do you know Gatlinburg in Tennessee in the
mm,
Smoky Mountains, right? Log cabins, beautiful, beautiful log cabins designed as log cabins inside. You got like these wood bed frames, all that kind of stuff with wood all over the walls, and it's just really like feels like a cabin, right?
mm.
Now picture that on the beach in Florida. It just doesn't make any sense, right? And that's a super obvious one, right? It's very, very obvious when you kind of put it that way. You would never design a Florida home as a cabin that
Mhm.
would be out in the middle of the woods, and vice versa. Now, if you try and think about it, what if you wanted to market towards like females, families, or males, right? Or what if you want to focus on like a 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds in comparison to 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds, right? They all have a different little design that they care about or that they want. And so, what I like the biggest way to have an advantage over everybody in your market is to figure out who's coming to your market that's going to be paying the most or willing to pay the most because they have such a demand, they want to be there so bad. Like a really easy example is bachelorette parties, right? There's only a handful of cities across the entire United States that make great bachelorette destinations. And so
Mhm.
if you put together a listing that is like so superior in the way it's designed that somebody who's going for a bachelorette party wants to stay there more than anything, right? Then you're going to get that booking, and you're going to get it for higher than everybody else. And
Mm.
a real example of this, and it's on my TikTok. I posted it a while ago, or sorry, on my Instagram as well. Is there's these two listings. They're literally like almost touching. They're so close to each other. Both 4 bedrooms, both with a pool, almost the exact same size and everything. And the one is designed pretty well. It's got like murals everywhere. It's got hanging lights. It's got good photos. It's making $120,000 a year. Then there's
Mhm.
this other one that is decked out in pink and neon lights and like everything you could imagine for a bachelorette party with like models in the photos and whatnot, showing off like girls hanging out for a bachelorette party. It's advertised as like the bachelorette party place to stay, and it's making $200,000. So an $80,000 difference by designing the home specifically to the customer archetype that they wanted to get there, that wanted that place more than anybody else, right?
Yeah.
That's I mean that's I see that in every single market. There's somebody who dominates by designing extraordinarily well and strategically, right? So yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah. And I think a good point you bring up too, and like, it's kind of like the amenities that pay you back, right? By looking at the data. Like I sometimes talk to a lot of people, and I host the RIA short-term rental group here, and sometimes people are like, oh, I want to put this in. They're like, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. What does the data tell you? Like, is it going to pay off? Like, is it going to pay off to install that amenity, right? Or does it not? Like, and I think
Yeah,
that's a really good point that people often overlook. They're like, oh, this is cool, but I'm like, does it drive revenue? Do your guests want it enough to pay a premium?
yeah. That's that's a very tough question to answer, right? So like that is a very tough question to answer, and even myself, I struggle to figure out the exact dollar amount that something like by adding X amenity, how much will it actually drive my revenue up, right? And you could look at a listings like two different listings that are side by side, right? Like that example I just gave you, where one was 200, one's 120. Everything was the same except for the design, right? So like that's an easy and obvious one that design made an $80,000 difference. But what about if one had like a jungle gym or a putting green or a slide? You know what I mean? Like it's it's so hard to say what kind of difference that actually makes. Um, the strategy that I have gone with, and we're getting more strategic, even more strategic with this, and we are like putting dollar values to everything. But we've been
Mhm.
going with a certain strategy where we create a list of the top amenities that are in a market, right? So first off, there's some markets where every single person has that amenity. So every single person has a hot tub and a fire pit. No matter what, they all have it, right? And so you can't not have it. You have to have it in your listing. There's no option, right? Because if you don't, you're not going to get booked. So it is what it
Mhm.
is, right? So you have to get those amenities. Then there's all these other amenities that you start to see, like a game room and a deck with hanging lights and really nice photos, and then you have like a movie theater, and you have this and you have that, and so what our strategy has been is we compile a list of all of these amenities that these people have within a market. We figure out what all they are, right? Especially the ones at the very top, the ones that are doing the best. And then we essentially just take that list and we apply almost all of those amenities to our one listing, right? So
Mhm.
you go from having like we got the main ones, but we've also got the other 8 that were spread out across these 4 listings. We've added them all
Mhm.
to this one listing, right? We don't know the exact. We don't have it like pinpointed, right? And like Steve would probably hate hearing me say that, but like the reality is we don't have it exactly pinpoint, but we have it close enough, right? And we're seeing the return without a doubt. Like we're seeing without a doubt. And we are figuring out ways of trying to know exactly what that dollar return will be if we add a giant chess. So we're working on those models right now. But that strategy of just like sort of applying everything has been working so well and so beautifully, and we're getting the returns that we want. So, for the average investor out there, more is better, right? To compete on value, not price, and it's worth the investment if you can put it in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. You guys remember, if anyone's watching has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll definitely ask them for John to answer. Um, how are you looking at travel as the economy shifts? Are you building that into models at all?
could you elaborate on that a little bit? I think I know what you mean. I just want more
Yeah,
information.
so like a lot of times when like, the economy kind of starts to slow down, travel is something that people cut. And I was
Yeah,
wondering how, if and how you guys are factoring that into your purchase decisions.
yeah. So remember what I was talking about earlier with supply and demand and getting picking out markets that were
Mhm.
consistent, right? So they weren't falling behind or anything like that. Um, that's actually one way that you can counter this, right? You don't follow the trend of a market that just does well during a certain time period or has some demand. You know what I mean? So a good example of this is like LJ, Georgia is a little mountain town that killed it during COVID, right? And now that COVID's over, nobody's really going there as much, and the demand has completely fallen off the cliff,
Hmm.
right? And so one for the first strategy is you pick the markets where people are constantly going no matter what, right? They're always going, right? Then the second strategy behind that is what we've just been talking about. Have the best listing in that market over everybody else. And the reason being is because if you think about it, even during COVID, when everyone in the world was locked inside, people still traveled, right? People still booked Airbnbs. They still went on these little vacations. They figured out a way that they could travel, even during a time where we literally were not allowed to move. And so when the economy does slow down, people are still going to be traveling, right?
Mhm.
It's going to be happening no matter what. So even if less people are traveling, they're still going to be going into a specific market. And let's say there's 1,000 listings, but now there's only 500 people that are actually going there, right? Well,
Mhm.
the 500 listings that are not going to get booked are going to be the shitty ones that nobody wanted in the first place, but just had to take because there was nothing left. So those
Mhm.
ones are all not going to get booked. But like I said before, we're basing our homes off of value and not price, right?
Mhm.
So even when the market does slow down, we have a product that people are willing to pay for, and they're not really basing it off of the dollar amount. They're basing it off of like all of these things that they're going to be getting out of the place, right?
Mhm.
And like we're really I can't really give away secrets, but we have a strategic way of doing that even in competitive markets that allows us to get this sort of leg up on everybody, right?
Mhm.
And so anyways, we that's our logical strategies that we're going where people are still going to be traveling, where we're in markets that are consistent even during hard times. And if we have the best of the best in that market, then we will be able to still get booked based off of value even when stuff starts to get a little bit harder, right?
Yeah.
And we're actually, so credit to what I'm saying, we're seeing that already, right? So
Mhm.
we have a lot of homes in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I track the data in Scottsdale basically daily, right? I'm reviewing it every day. And there's listings that you have these like average listings or decent listings, actually. They're good, right? And I can see that from August to now, their sort of trailing 12 months has dropped by about 20,000 to 25,000, right? So
Right.
they're making 175,000 a year before. Now they're making 150,000, right?
Mhm.
But then you get this, but then there's other listings that we kind of like, we also track that are good listings, right? It's really well put together listings. And I can see that, those listings are only dropping by like 5 to 10,000, right?
Mhm.
So already right there, you can see that there's a difference in how much these homes are dropping, even as the economy drops. Like the nicer listings are dropping less, and then our listings are still outperforming what we expected them to make in the first place, right? So like, like so like it's a little bit of credit to like what I'm saying is we've been testing it out, we've been improving it, and we're actually doing that right now. It's all just part of the strategy. And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say that we did everything right, we know everything. I'm just saying that we have a lot of strategies and we're applying them, and they seem to be working right now. And there's still a lot that we're learning, and still a lot that we need to figure out. We're going to keep improving as we continue to go, but like that's where we're at right now. Yeah.
And how much are you guys renovating to get to the level of this ideal listing? Like, what level of renovation are you willing to do in order to make this product that is the best product that
Yeah.
has all the amenities?
Depends on every single home. Depends. Home by home is different. Like with so I could give you a bunch of different examples, but every single home is a little bit different, right? I can give you some examples of things that we've done though. So, in some places we've had to like gut, right? Like you're getting rid of the kitchen, the bathroom, and you're replacing everything, adding
Mhm.
in all the furniture amenities and adding some, amenities in the backyard. Sometimes we'll just come in and we'll just paint the cabinets. We'll keep them the same. We'll just paint them a more modern, fun color because you can get away with that in an Airbnb. One thing that we actually have noticed, and I remember this from back in Chicago, is that bathrooms don't matter all that much. They don't drive revenue. So if you
Mhm.
have like $20,000 that you have to spend and you're thinking about putting it into renovating the bathroom to bring it up to speed and make it look so much nicer, that's not going to increase your revenue like you would think it would do, right? As
Hmm.
long as your bathroom is decent and you add maybe like a modern mirror and a modern vanity, change out the shower head, right? You're good to go, right? Add in like the other little decor to make it, pretty and nice and whatnot. You don't need to gut the entire thing. You can just add in those little things, and people are going to be completely okay with it, right? We have plenty of bathrooms that we could have gutted, but we just haven't because it costs like $20,000 to change out a bathroom, and it's just you don't get the ROI on that like you would if you were to be flipping a home. right? Now, this is another piece to it where we're eventually going to sell the entire portfolio. And if the bathrooms are not all done, then that could be an issue on the value of the home when we go to actually sell it, right? So that's sort of a question that we're still trying to figure out right now. But as of right now, we actually leave bathrooms alone for the most part when we come to them. But a lot of work does go into the backyard as well.
Hmm.
Like we'll turf out a whole backyard if we have to.
You'll do what? Sorry.
We will turf out, like we'll add turf to the entire backyard if we have to.
Hmm.
Like turf, we'll spend 20 grand on mini putt in some locations because we see the ROI with it in comparison to
Wow.
throwing 20 grand into the bathrooms. It's a good investment. It literally is like a straight up, it's a good investment in certain markets. In some markets, it's not, right? And kind of like how I said, a hot tub is a good investment across the board. In our Florida markets, we don't add hot tubs because like nobody has them and it makes no difference, right? It's Florida, it's already hot
Yeah.
enough, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's just an easy example, right?
Yeah. What
Yeah.
markets are you guys in Florida?
I don't know if I can say. So
Okay. Well, you're not in Jacksonville. We know that.
yeah, I just looked into Jacksonville recently and I'm like, it's still not going for it.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that you can very easily just look up Techvestor and you can reach out to our team and they'll likely give you all the details you want. I just don't know if I can
Yeah.
actually
Fair
say
enough.
anything online. So,
It was more a
so
curiosity question than anything.
yeah,
So
yeah. I hate holding back. I wish I could say everything and anything. There's so many little things that'd be like because I'm talking a lot and I'm a data person, so I like to back everything up with proof. You know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah.
hey, here, look at it. I can actually do this, right? So like I have so many little things I wish I could show you right now. But like I said, we are in the process of being able to share a lot more for this year because of the way that we set up Fund 2. And so you'll be seeing a lot more like actual detail and data of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think that would be like a good follow up or, another doing this again another time and going through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is the plan for Fund 2 if it's been announced yet?
It's the exact same thing. Like we're continuing to buy single family homes, turning them into Airbnbs. We plan on like we're hoping to be able to do quite a bit more than we did this year, right? Obviously, we got to raise the money. We got to continue to prove that we're doing what we're doing and keep making that push. But the main thing that we're going to be doing is buying single family homes and turning them into Airbnbs across a lot of different markets. So with a strategic portfolio that's like I said, some places are yield, some places are equity, making sure we're buying good product, making sure we're in good demand, making sure we're accounting for the economy slowing down, like all these things across the board.
Yeah.
So yeah, got it.
What's your target amount that you guys are trying to raise for this second fund?
150,
150.
150 million is the goal. So
And
we
that would
did 30. Pardon?
go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go ahead. What are you gonna ask?
Oh, I was gonna ask again, how many homes would you expect that to be able to purchase? I know you've got operating expenses too, but
Yeah. So our goal for homes is 200 this year. Obviously, if we did 36 million this year, we bought 70 homes. So if we raise 150 million, we should be able to buy quite a few more than that. But our sort of ground level target is 200 homes over the next year. Yeah.
and do those tend to be like, is that kind of where you buy is like $500,000 homes? Is that kind of generally the ballpark?
Yeah, it averages to that. Let's put it that way, because we're
Yeah.
definitely buying in a lot of different markets and different. Uh, some are big, some are small. So it averages to around 500,000. That's kind of the metric that we use when we're averaging out. Like if we raise $1 million, we can buy 2 homes. That's how we think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for someone who's smaller operator than you guys, right? Maybe someone who's maybe they're buying their first one, or maybe they got six or seven, and they kind of want to take a more data oriented approach to make sure they're investing in the right assets. What's a piece of advice that you have for them?
For someone getting started or somebody who has six or seven, because those are
Let's
vastly
start with
different
six or
people.
seven. That's two questions. Sorry.
6 or 7. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, it's six, when I talk to people who have 6 or 7, they're well educated. Like they know stuff, right? Like it's not easy to get to 6 or 7, especially if you're purchasing the properties. And so those people tend to know what they're doing, and they're usually in the mindset of expanding into another market for whatever reason. They want exposure, cash flow, they want to even it out, like something along those lines.
Hmm.
So, if you're planning on, if you've got that many and you're looking to go into another market, or you've considered it, right? Some things to keep in mind is just pick a market that you want to go into. Right? I've studied like thousands of markets, and they all generally make the same amount of money, right? If you're investing, sorry, let me explain. There are some markets that definitely don't make money, right? Like Jacksonville. And then there's other markets that are pretty consistent across the board, right? Like they average out. Homes tend to max, like they tend to only be able to make so much. Like a 4-bedroom can only make so much, right?
Hmm.
Unless it becomes luxury, or you're in like a all-star market, right? So what I'm trying to say is that most markets are even or fair across the board. And
Hmm.
so if you're trying to expand into a different market, pick a market that you want to actually go to. Pick one that you enjoy going into, the one that you would enjoy to go there once a year, every single year, or move there if you have to move there. You know what I mean? Like if you like the desert, go to the desert, go to a desert location. If you like the mountains, go to a mountain location. Find something that meets your desires, because you're going to have to spend so much time there regardless. You might as well like it. And what I'm trying to tell you is that you're not missing out on anything by trying to go to some other best possible return market, right? Like what I'm trying to say is they're all fairly even for the most part. Once you get to a certain sort of level, they're all fairly even on the return that you're going to be getting. So just pick something that you actually like. That's what I would say for anybody who has 6 or 7, because that's a trend I see over and over and over again. So they're always trying to find the best of the best.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, the person who's maybe looking at their first, and let's call it a purchase, not an arbitrage, and maybe they're looking to stay just local, right? What's your piece of advice for them?
It's all about it. I mean, it's a 3-step process, right? So number one, you figure out your regulations. Number two, you understand your data. And number three, you get into your operations, right? You do not need to learn operations until you get the listing. You don't need to know how to message a guest, or how to clean a home, or how to design a home until you actually have a home that's going to do really well. You don't need to know what softwares to use or any of that shit, right? So regulations is full. Once you've passed that, you're good to go. And then it's the data part, where you've got to spend all of your time to understand that data, to
Hmm.
ensure that you are getting the right home in the right location with the right bones, the right structure, right? That's actually, and at the right price, that's actually going to allow you to cash flow and hit the targets that you want to hit the 20% cash on cash that you want to hit, right? And so 20, 30, 40, whatever the hell you want to call it, right? So what I would suggest, okay, is let's say you're in Jacksonville and you want to open up an Airbnb. And I know I've been making a lot of jokes about Jacksonville, but there is still money to be made in Jacksonville. So I just want to, throw that
Or
out
go to
there.
St. Augustine, guys. Come on, it's not that far.
Yeah, good luck finding something there. But
I know. Yeah.
um, so what you want to do, right, is you want to look into the data, and you want to study it, and you want to try to understand it. And now I've got 3 courses on YouTube that teach you how to understand Airbnb data thoroughly, like from one end to the other, the process that I use still to this day to find these highly profitable properties for this fund, right? And it's just sitting on YouTube for free. And so if you look up my name and you go to my playlist, you can go through my different channels, and they're gonna, my different playlists have 2 different courses. There's a 1.0 course and the 2.0 course, right? Personally, I think the 2.0 course is the best one. And you go through all of that, and you're gonna learn all the nuances of data, how to understand it, how to read it, how to avoid bad data, how to make sure that you're making the right decisions, and how to maximize your revenue, how to find the best possible product, right? And so go through all that. And if you have to buy an AirDNA subscription, do it. I offer a report as well, that has all of the data for any location that you're going into, and it'll allow you to navigate a city very quickly and see exactly where the most money is being made, and then also be able to determine what are the main revenue drivers for that market, right? And so, you can reach out to me and I can offer you that product, but you're going to need to understand data. And then once you do, you will know exactly what home to purchase. You'll have a really good idea of how much that home is actually going to make you, and then you'll be able to purchase that home with a lot of confidence. And if you're going to be raising money from somebody else to do that, you're going to have a lot of confidence you'll be able to do it, right? So can't stress that enough. You've just gotta study the data. Then once you get the home, go and figure out the operations, right? Then go figure out how to message a guest, how to put it together, how to take photos, all that stuff. So
Yeah. Don't do it in the reverse
yeah,
order. You got to get something
yeah,
first.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone starts with like, well, what software should I use? I've heard of this Price Labs thing, and it's like you don't even have a home. You don't even know if you can legally do it in this area. What do you do? You know what I mean?
I share the
So
same advice with people as you. I'm like, first of all, make sure you're allowed to do it. Then
yeah,
make sure you find a property, and then worry about how you're gonna manage it.
design
Like,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
design and manage it, whatever. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So I mean, it makes logical sense, but sometimes you just get so excited about the little things, right? Like, oh, I can put it together like this, or I can message guests like that, and you're thinking about how you're going to operate it before you actually have something. And I can't. And the reason I'm so freaking nuts about the data, right, is because the amount of people that I've spoken with and talked to who have either rented a home or purchased a home in an area that would not cash flow for them, right? Where
mhm,
there just wasn't enough demand, or the home was too small, or the home didn't have X amenity, right, that they needed to be able to hit the $100,000. And so they only ended up making $75,000, but their expenses on the entire year were $75,000. You know what I mean? So they walked away with nothing. And I can't stress that enough because I've done that multiple times myself, right? When I was first getting started, like a first couple of homes I picked up the wrong ones because I didn't understand the data and I made no money. And it's like you invest all this money into furniture or even purchasing the home and you just walk away with nothing and it's like it sucks, right? So right, if you just study the data, then you have like such a greater chance of actually making money off of that property than if you weren't to study the data. So
yeah,
anyways, that's my spiel and I can obviously get
yeah.
real into it.
I had a similar conversation with someone the other night when they were asking me what I would do first if it was my first property, and I told them I'm like, you can't outmanage a bad property.
You can't.
Like,
You
if
just
you're the
can't.
best manager in the world, it doesn't matter if you have an asset that sucks.
It
Like,
doesn't. It also does. I've been talking about design and amenities and all this stuff, right? Like, I get so worried about buying a home that's too small, right? Like
mhm,
that's a big fear that I have. Like, I don't want to buy a 3 bedroom, 1,000 square foot home, even if it is in Fort Lauderdale, right?
mhm,
Because it's so small that people can see that when they're going to book out the home, they know it's a lot smaller than all the other ones. They just don't want it, right? And so if they don't want it, then they're going to book all these other ones before you, which means you got to lower your average daily rate. Then you're going to get less occupancy and all these different things. And so like, yeah, I mean, if you understand, I can't remember why I was talking about the size of the home, but like it's one of those things where you got to understand exactly what you're purchasing, ensuring you're purchasing the right thing. Because if you're not purchasing the right thing, it doesn't matter how well you design it, how good your amenities are, you're not going to hit the numbers that you want to hit. It
yeah,
just is what it is.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, man.
Cool, man. Well, there's always kind of two questions that I like to wrap up the show with, and I'll adapt the first one a little bit to the short-term rental business. So,
Okay.
um, what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation you've ever experienced with a guest?
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite stories. One of these scenarios I probably would have never thought I'd be in, but having homes in Chicago and with Chicago having a lot of gangs on the south side, those gangs like to book out Airbnbs on the north side and hide out from people, right? Like that is a proven thing, and I know that for a fact because I had to kick out one of these gangs from my Airbnbs because they were partying like crazy, and I just had to kick them out, and I just was trying my hardest to get rid of them. I didn't want to call the cops on them because I talked to the one guy. There's one guy that was there. He came out. He's this 21-year-old guy, and we talked for like a half an hour. He was literally one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. He's like, "Man, can you please just not call any cops on us?" There's a lot of people with like warrants out for them in there, and they're like, "We don't want to get arrested." And like we just talked for so long, and I was like, "There's grown men on the south side trying to kill us, and like we're just trying to hide out, and like all these different things." And yeah, so I pretty much had to like negotiate with this guy to get him out of my Airbnb. And I finally came down to the point where I was like, listen, you can stay the night, but like leave in the morning. They were planning on staying like another day or two. I'm like, just leave in the morning. I'll let you stay the night. That's fine. And anyways, so we ended up agreeing on that and he took off. They took off in the morning, but it was, that doesn't sound that very intense, but I had to like confront them like multiple times. And I was way outnumbered and it was just, it was a very uncomfortable situation, but I was pissed actually. So I was really mad. I was really mad at them at first and I didn't want to leave them alone. And I was like, get out of my fucking listing. I like just pissed. They just wouldn't budge. I'm a Canadian guy who probably didn't know what situation I was in. I probably shouldn't have said what I said, but
Yeah. You're still here to tell a story, so.
Yeah, exactly. We're good. So that's definitely my craziest story for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
second question is, if you could go back in time when you were looking for your first property, give yourself one piece of advice, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
The first thing that came to my mind was to go watch my own courses, but that didn't exist at the time. You know what I mean?
Look into the future.
Yeah, looking into the future. I'm trying to think of like, there's so many. You know what I probably would have told myself is learn how to do arbitrage, right? Like get a couple
Mm,
under your belt doing rental arbitrage, just to get an understanding of the operations and get an understanding of the flow of things, right? Get a couple, but then put all of your effort into figuring out how to purchase properties. All of
mhm,
your focus into raising money to actually do joint venture deals, and just stay 100% focused on that for the rest of your life, because like that's I think where the most net worth will come from, and longevity of an actual business will come from. And the reason I say that is because like that's literally my plan, right? So for the rest of my life, I'm going to be doing joint venture deals, opening up Airbnbs, working with this company around Airbnb, doing Airbnb consulting. But I have all the experience from arbitrage, and arbitrage just gives you the knowledge you need to then go out and do it on a higher level. And so,
mhm.
but starting with the arbitrage ones will ensure that you don't screw up when you take investors' money and put it into a bad Airbnb. So
Yeah, cool.
yeah,
That's a great piece of advice. Get bruised on the cheaper stuff. So,
exactly. And use your own money to get bruised,
yeah,
right?
use your money. Yeah, yeah.
Use your own money. Don't use somebody. It's going to hurt a lot more, and especially if you're using your own money, you're going to want to make sure you use the data to get it right? Because a
Oh
data
yeah,
report costs you $500, but the to furnish the entire place is going to cost you 10 grand, right? So make
at
sure
least.
you're investing that 10 grand well. Yeah.
Yep. Cool,
Oh
man.
man.
Well, go ahead.
Before we
Sorry.
hop off, though, before we hop off, I need everyone to know Mike is literally the man. You're the great. You are, you're man. I tell everybody still to this day that I would not be where I am today if it was not for you, because I tried to get away from Airbnb at one point because I was jaded by it during COVID and everything. But Mike knew that I knew the data better than anybody, and I had helped Mike with the data, and he sent me so many people, so many people, that he brought me back to Airbnb, and he regrew my love for Airbnb just through the data side. And like, man, I can't give you props enough. I'm so grateful. It's not even funny. I'm literally where I am today just because you wouldn't stop referring me people, and I fell back in love with it, with Airbnb, and figured out a way to like turn it into a business and everything. But it's just because you just believed in me and you kept sending me people. So man, give you all the props in the world. I appreciate you more than you know.
Yeah.
Honestly, swear. So thank you
Thanks, man.
again. Yeah,
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it.
that
Um,
way, but yeah.
if just one more time, I know you mentioned already, but if people
Right.
want to reach out to you, or if they maybe want to do your courses, how would they go about doing that?
So what I would say, if you're going to reach out to me, watch my courses first, right? Because my courses are going to, like literally 90% of everything that I know is in those courses. And so look up my name, John Bianchi, on YouTube. Look up the Airbnb data guy, on YouTube. You're going to find me. You're going to go to my playlist. You're going to go through my courses, and you're going to learn like 90% of everything that I know, because I give it out for free, right? And it's literally the vast majority of what I know. So just go and figure that out. And then if at that point you still have questions, or you want one of my reports, you can reach out to me at that point, or you can purchase one of the reports, and you're going to get all the information that you need to be able to make the right decisions and get the best possible properties. But YouTube and all my stuff is definitely the best place to go. TikTok and Instagram is just for the fun stuff, to kind of get the following and funnel people back over to YouTube. So can't stress enough. All of my stuff is on YouTube, and more to come for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. I really appreciate you being on the show today. I guess
Thanks for having
lesson takeaway from today is don't invest in Airbnb in Jacksonville. I'm just kidding.
Or be strategic if you're going to do it. Be very
Be
strategic.
strategic if you're going to invest in
Yeah,
Jacksonville on Airbnb.
yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Cool, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.